My best friend stole my boyfriend, married him, and bragged about her perfect life. 10 years later, we met again at a high-end event. She said, "Still single, I see." I smiled and replied, "Meet my husband." The moment she saw his face, she went completely pale because it was supposed to be just another high-profile event, the kind where the rich and successful parade in their finest clothes and rub elbows with the city's elite. But the moment my eyes met hers across the crowded ballroom, everything stopped. He was Sarah. My Sarah, the one I had called my best friend for years, smiling with the same smugness that had made her unbearable all those years ago. But it wasn't just the way she stood there, confidently draped in a designer dress, that hit me like a freight train. It was the words she uttered as she spotted me standing there, alone. "Still single, I see," she said with a laugh that carried across the room like an obnoxious bell. My stomach twisted. Thank you all for joining me on this journey. If these stories resonate with you, hit subscribe and be part of this incredible community. Your support means everything, and together we can keep creating meaningful content. Let's get started. I hadn't prepared for this moment, but I sure had planned for it. Smiling, I calmly replied, "Meet my husband." As soon as I said those words, I felt a rush of satisfaction that surged through my veins, a momentary victory over the years of pain and betrayal. Then, as Sarah's eyes flickered toward the man beside me, the world seemed to slow down. Her face, once so self-assured, went completely pale. The color drained from her cheeks, and I could see her composure falter for the first time in a long while. She blinked, mouth agape, as the realization dawned upon her. It was him, the man she thought she had stolen from me. James. The man she married. The man I had once loved. The one who had betrayed me in the most unforgivable way. The one I had thought I lost forever. But he was mine now, my husband. The sting of betrayal, the anger that simmered inside me over the years, the tears I shed in silence, all of it suddenly felt like it had led to this moment. My heart had been shattered once before, but now, standing beside James, it was whole again. Not just healed, but stronger. The pain of the past was no longer in control. The echo of Sarah's triumph over me had been muted by the life I had carefully built. A life that was so much more than she could ever imagine. I saw her trying to regain her composure, forcing a smile, but it was too late. I could almost hear the wheels turning in her head, processing the shock of what was happening in front of her. This wasn't the way it was supposed to go. She had thought she would always have the upper hand, the control over everything that once belonged to me. But now it was my turn to shine. James placed his hand on my back, a quiet show of support, a silent acknowledgement of what we had been through together. I could feel the tension in the air as everyone around us waited for the confrontation to unfold. But there was no need for words to be spoken. The look on Sarah's face was enough to tell the entire story. The once perfect life she had built with my ex-boyfriend was a house of cards, and now, it was falling apart before her very eyes. Sarah and I had been inseparable growing up. She was the one who knew all my secrets, my fears, my dreams. I had shared everything with her, trusted her in ways I had never trusted anyone else. When I started dating James, she was there, offering advice, support, and acting as the ever-loyal friend. But somewhere along the way something changed. Maybe it was the way James started to pay more attention to her than me, or the way she always found a reason to be around him just when we were alone. I dismissed the warnings, brushed them off as paranoia, but deep down I knew something was wrong. The first time I caught them together, I thought my world had come crashing down. I walked into the living room of our shared apartment to find Sarah sitting on the couch, her hand on James's leg, whispering to him in a way that was far too intimate for friends. The sight shattered me, but what hurt even more was the realization that James didn't even try to pull away. In that moment, I knew what had been happening all along. They had betrayed me in the worst possible way. At first, I didn't know what to do. I wanted to confront them, to scream at them, but I was paralyzed by the weight of it all. I loved James, and I had never imagined that Sarah would betray me like this. But the truth was undeniable, and it was inescapable. She didn't even apologize when I found out. Instead, she acted as if nothing had changed, as if I should be happy for them. She married him, and I was left behind, the fool who had trusted both of them. The years that followed were some of the darkest of my life. I watched from afar as Sarah posted photos of their so-called perfect life together. Every picture on social media felt like a knife in my chest. There were vacations, parties, their wedding, moments I should have shared with James, moments I had once dreamed of. But those dreams had been stolen from me, replaced with the bitter reality of their treachery. As for James, he had moved on easily as if our love had meant nothing. But I couldn't let go. For years, I lived in the shadow of their happiness, consumed by my anger, my hurt, and my desire for revenge. I wanted to make them feel the same way I did. The loneliness, the betrayal, the crushing pain that had never quite gone away. And then something changed in me. I stopped focusing on them and started focusing on myself. I decided that I deserved more than the life I had been handed. I went back to school, built my career, and surrounded myself with people who truly cared about me. Slowly, the pieces of my life began to fall back into place. I didn't need James or Sarah to define me anymore. I was stronger, more resilient, and most importantly, I was in control. It wasn't until years later, when I received the invitation to this high-profile event, that I realized how far I had come. The thought of seeing Sarah again after everything she had done to me didn't make me nervous. It didn't bring up the familiar pang of sadness I had once felt. No, this time it was different. I had everything I needed, everything I had worked so hard to build. And now, I was ready to show her that the life she stole from me had been replaced by something far greater. The moment I saw Sarah's face standing in front of me with that same air of superiority, I felt an unexpected calm wash over me. No anger. No jealousy. Just a quiet satisfaction. She wasn't my enemy anymore. She had never truly been the one I needed to worry about. I had one. And I was ready for her to see that. Her reaction when she saw James at my side was everything I had hoped for. The smug smile faltered, and for a split second I saw the truth in her eyes. She was no longer the winner. That title belonged to me now. The moment I saw Sarah's face crumble, I realized something important. All the years of pain, all the heartache I had buried deep inside had finally come to a head. It wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming myself, the person I used to be before I let them drag me through their web of lies. But before this night, before standing in front of Sarah and James again, I hadn't fully grasped how far I had come. I hadn't seen the strength I had built within myself until now. I used to be so sure of everything, so secure in the world I had crafted with my best friend by my side and my boyfriend at my arm. Life seemed simple then, like everything was falling into place. When Sarah and I met as teenagers, we were inseparable. It was as though we shared a special bond, a sisterhood that no one could break. We understood each other on a level most people couldn't. I was the quieter one, content with my thoughts and books, while she was the outgoing extrovert who knew how to make everyone laugh and feel at ease. Together we complemented each other perfectly. She was the loud spark to my calm glow, and I had never questioned the balance. When James entered our lives, things shifted slightly. I'll admit it, I had fallen for him hard. At first it was innocent enough, just a guy I met at a mutual friend's party. He was charming, attentive, and kind. I felt like the luckiest girl in the world to be with someone like him. But looking back, I see the signs I had missed, the cracks in the foundation that I had ignored. Sarah, as my best friend, always knew how to make me feel secure, and I trusted her with everything, including my heart. James and I started dating when I was in college. Felt like a dream come true. I had always wanted someone like him, smart, driven, and handsome. But something started to shift in the way Sarah looked at him. At first, I thought it was just me being paranoid. After all, she had always been close to the people I cared about, so I didn't think anything of it. But then it started getting harder to ignore. Sarah would text James late at night, and they'd meet for coffee under the pretense of talking about some project or schoolwork. At the time, I chalked it up to their shared interests and thought nothing more of it. How naive I had been. The signs became clearer as time went on. I began to notice the lingering glances, the way Sarah would always find an excuse to touch his arm or lean in just a bit too close. When I confronted her about it once, she brushed it off, claiming I was overreacting. I wanted to believe her. I really did. She was my best friend, after all, the person who had always been there for me. She wouldn't betray me like that, right? But the doubt was there, a quiet whisper at the back of my mind that I tried to ignore. The breaking point came one rainy evening when I came home early from a dinner with friends. I opened the door to find them, Sarah and James, sitting on the couch in a way that no best friend and her boyfriend should ever sit. There was laughter, but it wasn't the carefree sound I was used to. It was different, like they were in on some private joke that I wasn't part of. I saw Sarah's hand rest on his knee, her fingers lingering a bit too long. The chill in my bones wasn't from the rain outside. It was the sudden realization that everything I had known had just shattered. I couldn't move at first. I stood there in the doorway feeling my heart pound in my chest. They hadn't seen me yet, but I didn't need to hear the words to understand what was going on. My best friend, the person I trusted more than anyone, was not just flirting with my boyfriend, she was stealing him from me. Slowly, I stepped back, closing the door quietly behind me before either of them could notice I was there. I needed space to breathe, to process what I had just seen. But it was clear now. My worst fear had come true. That night, I sat in my car in the driveway for hours, tears blurring my vision, until finally I took a deep breath and told myself something I hadn't been able to say before. I wasn't going to let them destroy me. I wasn't going to let Sarah and James have the power to tear apart my life. So, I did what anyone would do when faced with such a betrayal. I ran. I left without saying a word to either of them. I moved across the country to start over, to build a life that had nothing to do with them. I threw myself into my career, finding solace in the work that I loved. I surrounded myself with new friends who didn't know about the past that still haunted me, and in time I learned to rebuild my confidence. But the pain of their betrayal never fully left me. It was always there, lurking beneath the surface. A reminder of how easily someone you trust can hurt you. Over the years, I watched as Sarah and James built a life together. Their pictures flooded social media. Vacations, anniversaries, milestones. Each photo was a reminder of what they had taken from me, of how they had stolen my happiness and twisted it into something ugly. At first, I resented them both. But as time went on, I realized something. My anger, my hatred, it was only keeping me stuck. And I wasn't going to let them have that power over me any longer. I started focusing on what mattered. My growth, my happiness. Slowly I began to forgive, not for them but for myself. I didn't need them in my life to be whole. I was enough on my own. I found love again in a way I had never expected. I met someone who saw me, truly saw me, and loved me for everything I was. I found my peace, and in doing so I started to reclaim the parts of myself I had lost in their betrayal. But I never forgot what they had done. That's when the invitation to this event arrived. It was a high-profile gala filled with influential people from all walks of life. I knew Sarah and James would be there, their perfect little bubble still intact. But I had something they didn't know. I had built a life far beyond what they had ever imagined for me. And as I stood there face to face with Sarah at that gala, I realized just how much power I had gained over the years. Power I had taken back not by revenge but by the life I had made for myself. The night was no longer about the betrayal. It wasn't about them. It was about me. It was about showing Sarah that her victory had always been hollow, that I had always been stronger than she gave me credit for. The tension in the room was palpable, but it wasn't just from the awkwardness of the moment. I had watched Sarah's face fall when she saw James, and I could feel the weight of the years of silence between us pressing on both of us. My heart beat faster as I stood there trying to keep my composure. The revenge I had so carefully orchestrated was finally unfolding, but in a way I hadn't fully anticipated. There was a part of me that wanted to savor this moment, to let her see the culmination of everything I had worked for, but there was something else. Something deeper, that I couldn't shake off. As I smiled at Sarah, I could see the storm brewing behind her eyes. She was trying to maintain her image, her mask of perfection, but I could tell it was slipping. She had always been good at pretending everything was fine even when it wasn't. But now, standing in front of me, she was being forced to face the truth. The truth that everything she had built on the back of my broken heart was about to crumble. She had taken James from me, thinking she would always have the upper hand, thinking she had won. But I wasn't the same woman I had been when she first betrayed me. I wasn't the naive girl who believed her lies. I had become someone stronger, someone who knew what she deserved and wasn't afraid to fight for it. James, standing beside me, didn't say a word, but his presence spoke volumes. The last time I had seen him, he had been with Sarah, married to her, living the life I had dreamed of with him. I had hated him for what he had done to me. The anger I had felt in the aftermath of their betrayal had consumed me. It had taken years to move past that pain, to finally accept that I couldn't control the actions of others. But in this moment I realized something I hadn't fully acknowledged before. It wasn't just about revenge. It wasn't about hurting Sarah the way she had hurt me. It was about reclaiming my power, my happiness, and my life. And yet, as I looked at Sarah, I couldn't help but feel a flicker of something else. Something I hadn't expected. I almost felt pity for her. She was standing there, her face pale, her smile strained, trying to hold on to the facade of the perfect life she had carefully constructed. But it was all an illusion. I could see the cracks in her armor. I could see that the life she had stolen from me had never truly been hers. And it wasn't just because of James. It was because she had always been a part of my life in a way that no one else had. We had shared everything, our dreams, our fears, our hopes, and she had turned it all into something ugly. But as much as I wanted to feel sorry for her, I couldn't ignore the fact that she had broken my trust in the most devastating way. She had taken everything from me. And she had done it with a smile on her face, pretending she was the victim in the story. She had convinced herself that she was entitled to James, that their love was meant to be, while I had been left behind, picking up the pieces of my shattered heart. I had spent so many years trying to forget, trying to move on, but every time I thought I had put the past behind me, something would trigger the memories. The pain would resurface, raw and unrelenting. I had tried to bury it beneath my success, beneath the new life I had built, but it was always there, lurking beneath the surface. Now, standing in front of Sarah, it was impossible to ignore. The floodgates opened and I could feel the tears pricking at the corners of my eyes. But I refused to let them fall. Not now. Not in front of her. I had spent so many years trying to figure out what I could have done differently, what I could have said to make things right. But the truth was, there was nothing I could have done. Sarah had made her choice and James had made his. And they had both chosen betrayal. The one person I thought I could trust, the one person I had always relied on, had turned her back on me when I needed her the most. And James, the man I had loved with all my heart, had walked away from me without a second thought, leaving me to pick up the pieces of my broken heart. But in the midst of all the pain, something had shifted in me. I had learned to forgive, not for them but for myself. I had stopped letting their actions define who I was. I had stopped letting their betrayal control my happiness. And when I stood there looking at Sarah, I realized that I had finally let go of the anger. I had finally let go of the need for revenge. Instead of letting Sarah see the rage that had been boiling inside me for years, I gave her something else. Something she hadn't expected. I gave her the satisfaction of seeing me happy, seeing me whole. I let her see that I didn't need her or James or anyone else to define who I was. I had created a life that was mine, one that was built on my terms, not theirs. And that, in itself, was the greatest form of revenge. But the twist came when Sarah opened her mouth to speak again. Her words were laced with disbelief, but they also carried a hint of something else. Something I couldn't quite place at first. She had always been confident, but now there was something fragile in her voice. She was trying to hold on to the remnants of her perfect life, trying to salvage whatever pride she had left, but it was clear to me that it was slipping away. She wasn't just facing the fact that I had moved on. She was facing the truth that everything she had fought for, everything she had stolen, was built on a lie. "I can't believe it," Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible. "You actually won." The words hit me like a punch to the stomach. It wasn't just about James anymore. It was about everything. It was about the years I had spent in silence, the years I had spent trying to make sense of the betrayal, the years I had spent thinking I was the one who had lost. But in that moment I realized something important. I hadn't lost it all. I had won, not by taking something from her but by finding myself again. I smiled, a small, quiet smile that only I could understand. "No, Sarah. You lost. I found my way back." And with that I turned away, James by my side, knowing that the real victory wasn't in the past. It was in the life I was living now, a life that was mine and mine alone. As I stood there with James beside me, I couldn't help but feel the weight of the years that had led to this moment. The quiet satisfaction that had settled over me when I saw the look of shock on Sarah's face began to morph into something else. Something more powerful. It was the culmination of everything I had been through, but I realized in that instant that I wasn't quite done yet. The past wasn't over for me, not until I had made sure that the life I had built was everything I deserved and more. This wasn't just about the night or about Sarah's public humiliation. It was about reclaiming my narrative, about taking the life I had lost and making it better than it ever could have been with them. The idea of revenge, of having the upper hand once again, had simmered in the back of my mind for years. It hadn't been a reckless plan of spite. It had been a well-thought-out course of action, crafted from pain, patience, and determination. From the moment Sarah and James decided they could take everything from me, I made a silent promise to myself. I wasn't just going to survive their betrayal. I was going to thrive. At first, the plan had been simple: build a new life for myself, a life that wasn't defined by them or by the past. But over the years as I grew stronger, something changed. I realized that while rebuilding my life was necessary, there was something else I needed to do to really make this mine. I needed to make sure that both Sarah and James saw what they had lost. Not just a woman they had betrayed, but the woman they could have had, the woman they underestimated. I had always been the one to step back to let others take the lead. I had always believed that if I was just patient enough, if I just waited for the right moment, things would fall into place. But with this, I had learned that waiting wouldn't get me the justice I deserved. I had to take control. And so I did. It started with small things. I left the city I'd once shared with them behind. I had gotten used to the idea of moving forward, of building something new, but it wasn't enough. I started to work harder than ever before. My career took off in ways I hadn't expected. Every day I put everything I had into proving to myself that I didn't need them to succeed. I didn't need James or Sarah or anyone else who had ever doubted me. My work became my escape, my armor. And soon the success I had worked for started to shine through. The revenge didn't come from tearing down their lives, or trying to hurt them in the same way they had hurt me. It wasn't about sinking to their level. It was about showing them what they had forfeited by their betrayal, what they could never have again. I worked my way up higher and higher, building connections and gaining influence. It wasn't just about money or power. It was about control. It was about proving to myself that I could be more than what they had left me as. Then I met him. The man who would complete my plan without even knowing it. His name was Adam, and he was everything James had never been. He was confident, supportive, and most importantly, he respected me in ways I never knew I deserved. Our connection was instant. And as much as I hated to admit it, it felt like a breath of fresh air. Adam wasn't just someone who made me feel good in the moment. He was someone who saw me for who I truly was. Someone who could see through the hurt, the fear, and the doubts I had carried for so long. He understood me in a way that was beyond words. With Adam by my side, the pieces of my life started to fall into place. He encouraged me to pursue my dreams, to push past the limits I had set for myself, and to show the world what I was capable of. And in the process, something I never thought possible happened. I started to heal. The pain of betrayal was no longer at the forefront of my mind. Instead, it was replaced with hope, with the realization that the life I had built was better than anything I had imagined before. But that wasn't the end. No, the real test came when the time was right. I had spent years working towards this moment, and now it was time to make sure Sarah and James knew that they had lost everything. It wasn't about revenge for revenge's sake. It wasn't about gloating or rubbing their faces in their failure. It was about showing them that their actions had consequences. It was about showing them that they hadn't gotten away with it. And in a way, it was about showing myself that I had become something stronger than the woman they had once known. The day came when I received an invitation to the high-profile gala. A reminder of everything I had left behind, everything they had taken. Adam and I decided to attend together. He didn't know everything about my past with Sarah and James, but he knew enough to understand that this was important to me. The plan, though, wasn't just about showing up. I had orchestrated this moment from the very beginning. The details had been carefully planned. The perfect outfit, the perfect setting, and the perfect opportunity to make my presence known. I had become someone else in these years. Someone they didn't expect. I wasn't the woman who had been left behind. I wasn't the woman they thought they could walk all over. I was a woman who had risen from the ashes of their betrayal. Someone who had built a life better than they could ever imagine. As Adam and I walked into the gala, all eyes were on us. I could see Sarah in the distance, laughing and chatting with some of the other guests. And then, as if on cue, she turned and saw me. The look on her face was priceless. For the first time, she realized that her perfect life wasn't as perfect as she had made it seem. That she wasn't the one in control anymore. That I had taken back my life and I was living it in a way that she could never replicate. But it wasn't just about the look on her face. It was about the fact that, in that moment, I knew I had done something for myself. Something I could be proud of. Sarah's perfect world wasn't perfect anymore. It had crumbled under the weight of her own actions. And as the night wore on, I realized something important. I didn't need Sarah to understand my revenge. I didn't need her to apologize or make amends. What mattered was that I had come full circle. I had turned the pain they caused me into something far more powerful than anything they could have ever imagined. Revenge wasn't just about getting back at them. It was about taking control of my own story, of my own destiny, and showing the world that I was more than just a victim of their betrayal. I was the woman who rose above it all. The moment Sarah's eyes locked with mine, I could feel the air between us shift. It was more than just a recognition of the woman who had once been my best friend. It was a recognition of everything she had taken from me. But now, standing in the same high-profile venue with my life completely transformed, I realized I didn't need to say a word. She had already realized the truth. As we exchanged glances, her face paled, her confidence shattered. She had spent so many years pretending she had everything she wanted, the perfect life, the perfect marriage, the perfect facade. But it had all been built on lies, and now it was crumbling. She could see it in my eyes. The quiet satisfaction of knowing I had rebuilt myself into someone she would never understand. I didn't need to gloat. I didn't need to make her feel smaller than she already did. What I had wanted from the very beginning, was to show her that I had not only survived her betrayal, I had thrived in spite of it. I had built something far more valuable than her hollow perfection. And she could see it in me, in the way I stood tall, in the way my smile felt more genuine than hers ever could. Adam stood beside me, a silent presence that spoke volumes. He didn't need to understand the full history between me and Sarah. He didn't need to know every detail of the betrayal. He was here for me, and that was all that mattered. But I could see that even he noticed the shift in the atmosphere. He leaned in slightly, his voice low but reassuring. "You okay?" I nodded, more for myself than for him. "I'm more than okay." The words left my lips with such ease, such certainty, that I almost surprised myself. But I wasn't lying. I had finally found peace. Not in revenge, not in hurting Sarah or James, but in my own strength, in the life I had created for myself. Sarah, on the other hand, was visibly struggling. She was doing her best to regain her composure, but it was evident that she couldn't handle the situation. Her carefully constructed mask was slipping, and she didn't know how to fix it. She had always been the one in control. The one who had everything she ever wanted, the one who always got what she desired. But now, standing before me, she realized she wasn't in control anymore. I was. Her voice trembled when she finally spoke. "I never thought you'd actually make it out of this. I thought you'd crumble." The words stung, but not because they were true. No, they stung because they reminded me of the time when I had believed that very same thing. I had thought I wouldn't be able to survive their betrayal, that the pain would break me beyond repair. But here I was, standing stronger than ever, having turned that pain into something far more powerful. I smiled softly, shaking my head. "You don't know me as well as you thought." The words were simple, but they carried so much weight. They were the culmination of everything I had worked for, everything I had fought through. And in that moment, I realized that the best revenge wasn't in destroying Sarah. It was in showing her that I had found my own happiness, my own strength, without needing her or anyone else to validate it. James had been standing a few feet away, observing the exchange, his expression unreadable. I hadn't expected him to step in to say anything. But then, just as the tension reached its peak, he took a step forward. His voice, calm and steady, broke through the silence. "Sarah, this isn't what you thought it was. We both know that." For a split second it felt like time had stopped. Sarah's face twisted with disbelief, and I could almost feel her entire world crashing down. She had always thought she had won, thought that by marrying James she had somehow defeated me. But now, in this moment, the truth couldn't be denied. She hadn't won anything. She had merely taken the easy path, the one where she manipulated and deceived to get what she wanted. But I had earned my happiness. I had fought for it. And that was what made all the difference. "James, you don't mean that," she stammered, her voice cracking. Her eyes were wide with panic, like a cornered animal trying to make sense of the situation. But it was too late. The damage had already been done. The veil of perfection she had wrapped herself in for all these years was ripped away in an instant. James sighed, his gaze turning to me, then back to her. "I thought I wanted this life with you, but I was wrong, Sarah. I was wrong to think it could replace what I had with her. What we had." His words were soft, but they carried an undeniable truth. He had made his choice, and it hadn't been Sarah. It hadn't been the easy road, the one that had come with deception and betrayal. No, his heart, even after all these years, had never truly belonged to anyone but me. Sarah's eyes flicked between us, the realization dawning on her face like a heavy weight. It wasn't just me who had moved on. James had too. And no matter how much she tried to salvage the wreckage of their marriage, it wasn't going to happen. They weren't the power couple she had always imagined herself to be. They weren't the perfect pair. They were just two people who had built a life on lies, and now that life was unraveling. She turned on her heel, tears welling up in her eyes, but there was no sympathy in my heart for her. I had long ago stopped feeling sorry for her. What she had done was unforgivable, and the truth was that she had made her own bed. I had no desire to be a part of her story anymore, and I was finally free from the shackles of the past that had once bound me to her. As Sarah hurriedly walked away, I felt a strange sense of closure wash over me. It wasn't the kind of closure I had once imagined, where she would beg for forgiveness or apologize for everything she had taken from me. No, this was different. This was about me taking control of my own narrative, about me standing tall and showing the world that I was more than the woman they had tried to break. I looked at Adam and he smiled, squeezing my hand gently. "You did it," he said, his voice filled with pride. "You've come so far." I nodded, the weight of the moment sinking in. I had done it. Not just for myself but for the person I had once been. The woman who had believed she could never recover. I had proven her wrong. And as the night drew to a close, I realized that the real victory wasn't in what Sarah had lost. It was in everything I had gained. The peace, the happiness, and the strength that had always been inside me. It had never been about revenge. It had always been about reclaiming my life, my power, and my happiness. And in the end, that was the sweetest victory of all. The evening faded slowly into the night, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted inside me. The weight I hadn't even realized I was carrying had finally been lifted. As the gala came to a close, I stood in the center of the room, still processing everything that had just unfolded. The events of the evening felt surreal. What started as a night of rekindling old flames of anger and betrayal had ended with me standing victorious. Not in the way I had once imagined, but in a way that felt far more satisfying. James and I walked out of the venue together, and for the first time in years I felt like we were walking on the same path again. But this time it was different. There was no cloud of doubt hanging over us. There was no unfinished business to tie up. There was only a shared understanding, an unspoken connection that we had never truly lost, even after all the years apart. I looked up at him, meeting his eyes, and for the first time, there were no more questions between us. No more wondering what could have been. It was finally done. "Are you happy?" I asked him, the question slipping out before I could stop it. I was almost afraid of the answer, of what he might say, but I needed to know. This wasn't about Sarah or about revenge. This was about us. About whether we had a future beyond the shadows of our past. James smiled softly, a look of understanding in his eyes. "I am now," he said quietly. "I didn't know what I had until I lost it, and now that I've found it again, I'm not letting it slip away." There was something in his voice, something genuine, that made me realize how far we had both come. We had both carried the weight of our choices for so long, but now it was time to move forward. Together if we chose to. It was a strange comfort knowing that the past had been put to rest, not with anger or animosity, but with a shared recognition of what truly mattered. The drive home was quiet, each of us reflecting on the night, on everything that had led up to this moment. When we finally arrived at my apartment, I stepped out of the car, but something made me pause. I turned back to James, who was still sitting in the car, his eyes on me with a look that I couldn't quite place. "Are you sure you want this?" I asked him, my voice barely above a whisper. "Are you sure this is what you want?" James looked at me, a thoughtful expression crossing his face before he nodded slowly. "I never stopped wanting this. I was just too afraid to admit it." And with that we both knew. It wasn't about the mistakes we had made, the years that had slipped away. It wasn't about the betrayal, the hurt, or the broken trust. It was about understanding that sometimes, we have to lose ourselves to find what we truly need. And sometimes, it's not until everything falls apart that we realize what we've been searching for all along. The next few days passed by in a blur, but something had changed in me. It wasn't just the closure I had hoped for. It was the sense of freedom that came with it. I had let go of the bitterness that had once consumed me. I had let go of the need for revenge, of the desire to prove to Sarah that I had won. Instead, I was focusing on the life I was building with James, on the love that had survived despite everything. But even as I moved forward, I couldn't help but think of Sarah. The look on her face that night, the disbelief that she had tried so hard to conceal. It haunted me. In a way, I almost pitied her. She had spent so much of her life trying to be perfect, trying to outshine everyone around her, trying to prove that she was better than me. But in the end, It wasn't her perfect marriage or her carefully curated life that mattered. It was the truth that she had lost, and no amount of money, success, or fake smiles could change that. As time went on, I realized that I no longer needed to worry about Sarah or her life. She had made her choices and I had made mine. It was time to let her go, just as I had let go of the pain. The best revenge wasn't in watching her suffer or in making her feel the same way I had. The best revenge was in living my life, in being happy, in creating a future that was mine. The best revenge was in showing her that I didn't need her approval or her validation to be whole. One evening, a few weeks after the gala, I received a message from Sarah. It was short, but it carried an apology I never expected. She told me she had been wrong, that she had realized the damage she had caused, and that she was truly sorry. For a moment I felt a pang of sadness, but then I realized something important. Her apology didn't change anything. I didn't need it. I had already forgiven her long before that message arrived. Not for her, but for me. Forgiveness wasn't about letting her off the hook. It was about releasing myself from the chains of anger and resentment that had bound me for so long. I took a deep breath and put the phone down. The message was a step forward for her, and for that I was glad. But I had moved on. I had everything I needed in my life now. I didn't need her apology to find peace. I had already found it. The days continued to pass, each one bringing new opportunities, new beginnings. I was finally living the life I had always dreamed of. A life that was mine and mine alone. I no longer worried about the past, about Sarah, or about the pain they had caused. I was free. I was whole. And in the end, that was the most powerful revenge of all. As I sat on the balcony one evening, the sunset painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, I realized something else. This wasn't just about the closure I had longed for. It was about the future I had reclaimed for myself, a future that was full of possibilities. A future that was no longer defined by the past, but by the strength and resilience I had found in myself. And as the last rays of sunlight dipped below the horizon, I knew that my story was just beginning.